So how will the president's budget be received by Republicans on the Hill, many who ran vowing to cut federal spending? Ohio Senator Rob Portman, a member of the Budget Committee, joins us from Cincinnati. He was director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Bush. So, Senator Portman, this was once your job to send a budget up to Capitol Hill. I want to start with what this budget doesn't do. The president has chosen not to address the elephant in the room, entitlements, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, in this budget. By the way, Republicans aren't offering any solutions there either. So are both parties really missing the boat?
Well, Savannah, you're absolutely right. You talked earlier about this budget saving $1.1 trillion over the next 10 years. And then you also stated that this year's deficit alone is $1.6 trillion. So clearly this budget does not rise to the fiscal challenge that we face on three fronts. One is the annual spending. We just talked about that earlier. Kelly just reported on that. Second is the entitlements that you just mentioned. And you're right, it's over 60% of the budget now, and it's not addressed. And third is pro-growth policies to help us to grow the economy and bring in additional revenues.
Well, Senator Portman, I know earlier to our colleagues over at CNBC, you criticized the president for not showing leadership on this and said if he comes forward, you'll come forward. Well, if the message from the November elections was, okay, Republicans, it's your turn to come forward, then why not you guys come to the table with a plan on entitlements now as well? You know, if you say the president's not leading, then lead.
Well, Chuck, Republicans are leading. I mean, Kelly just did a report from Capitol Hill talking about this year's spending. This is not what's going to happen in 10 years. Let's actually have some reductions in the spending right now.
So that's not entitlements, right? I mean, let's be real about it. The huge part of the budget.
It's certainly leadership.
Well, okay, but
it certainly is leadership, and on the entitlement programs, I absolutely believe that. I mean, you look at the fiscal commission that the president used last year as a way to say, let's not make the tough choices, let's set up a fiscal commission instead. The fiscal commission comes out with some very specific recommendations on the entitlement side. 5 of the 6 senators on that commission supported it, including all of the Republicans, by the way. And what happens? The president this year says, well, we're going to reject those recommendations from the fiscal commission.
Let me stop you there. Wait a minute. I got to stop you there. The House Budget Committee chairman on that fiscal commission did not endorse the plan. At the end of the day, that is one of the reasons why this plan is that plan was considered politically DOA. So yes, the senators all agreed,
Chuck,
House Republicans.
But why did he not support the plan? He didn't support it because it didn't go far enough, because it didn't address the health care challenges in a way that he thought was adequate. It wasn't because it went too far. It was because he thought it didn't go far enough. So that's the dynamic here on Capitol Hill. People are ready to make some tough choices. The voters have spoken in November. They've spoken about 2 things. One is the need to get the spending under control, grow the economy. But second, we need to work together to address these problems. You know and I know, Chuck, it takes presidential leadership, and always has, to deal with the entitlement programs, as it did with Social Security. With regard to Medicare and health care, we need presidential leadership there as well. I believe, and I think the Commission's a good example of that, including Paul Ryan's decision, which wasn't that it didn't go far enough. He said that it didn't go far enough in terms of health care. I think the Republicans are ready to sit down and talk about these issues. But the president, in this budget, frankly, has missed an opportunity to do so.
Well, Senator Portman, setting aside kind of the blame game, I mean, you were the budget director. You understand this probably better than most. If you could wave a magic wand and act unilaterally, what would you advise on the issue of entitlements? For example, on Social Security, would you raise the retirement age?
Well, 5 years ago, I did have the job as budget director, and 4 years ago, I actually presented a budget that balanced in 5 years. That budget did include some changes in the Medicare program, including means testing in Medicare. That's not in the president's budget this year. Now, admittedly, Savannah, at that time, the budget deficit was $160 billion, so we were in much better shape. So
right, because we didn't have a recession, right? We didn't have a recession, so the tax receipts were up, and it's the hugest driver.
We also we had a stronger economy, and we also had more spending restraints because we didn't see what we've seen over the last 2 years, which is a 24% increase in the discretionary spending that the president is now talking about freezing. So it was a different environment, but the fact is we did present entitlement changes that the Congress did not accept, but this is what is required now. The president needs to show leadership, and look, he's made a big point about our fiscal problem. He's been eloquent about describing the problem, And the fact is that his solution today is not up to the challenge. And that's what we're looking for, is the president to actually match his rhetoric on the seriousness of our fiscal crisis with solutions that really work. And you just don't see this. I mean, you've talked about this in terms of the next 10 years, $1.1 trillion, a third of which is tax increases, by the way, and yet it doesn't even come close to meeting the challenge. It's less than 10% probably of the additional debt that will be accumulated during that time period.
Senator, very quickly, is your experience as a budget director, how often does the president's budget actually become law?
Well, you know, actually, Chuck, most of it does. About 80% of the budget will probably become law, but it's that 20% that really matters. And again, what we're looking at here is not a typical year. What we're looking at is a fiscal challenge that we've never faced before, the biggest deficit in the history of our country. In fact, today we will learn that the president says the deficit is $120 billion more this year than we just heard from the Congressional Budget Office a few weeks ago. Plus, we're looking at debts we've never been at this level before. We're looking at, over the next 10 years, getting to 100% of our economy in terms of our debt. Now, this is a situation that cries out for leadership, and it requires leadership on both sides of the aisle. But this is the president's opportunity. This is his vision for the next 10 years. And frankly, it doesn't rise to the challenge.
All right, Senator Rob Portman, a former budget director. We really appreciate having your perspective this morning, sir. Thanks you for joining us.
Good to be on with you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, John.
All right.